Welcome to the Ave Podcast with Cal C on South Shore Ave Radio.
Welcome to the Ave Podcast. What's going on, Keo? DJ Keo,
What's
you
up,
doing?
man?
What's going on?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Hanging in here. Surviving.
Yeah. Surviving. I wanted to just quickly do a quick pod to pay respect to an underrated legend, man, or at the very least, just somebody that just didn't get their proper due. At least I don't feel.
I say underrated because the people, people know some of the people from Bad Boy production team. You got your Stevie J. The people were more flamboyant. Chucky was chill. He was in the background.
Mm-hmm.
But if you check the credits of all the remixes he did for all these songs,
He was all over it.
He's there on almost every album. He did a remix for, or he had one of the big hits or something. Like it's incredible. Like with his run for Bad Boy in particular, his run was credible.
And that's the thing, right? Like Chucky Thompson was, to me, he was a legend, right? Like an underrated legend. Because when you tell the story for the 90s, especially our generation for black music, there were some super successful record labels, black record labels, from like LaFace Records to Uptown, the Death Row, at least when it comes to hip hop. And then you absolutely cannot tell the story of black music in the 90s without Bad Boy, right?
Yeah, you have to.
Yeah.
Bad Boy ran R&B music for the decade, the whole 90s.
They were the strongest leaders of that. I mean, on both sides, both hip hop and R&B. But
they set the tone.
Yeah, but when you think of like Bad Boy, right? Like the general biggest names that come up, of course, is Diddy and Biggie, and rightfully so because they were the biggest stars, right? Like you had the generational superstar artist, and then a superstar CEO, which you've never seen as like somebody in that leadership position taking that kind of role, right? But to build that company, there's a lot of people that help put that foundation up, put those bricks up, right? So from the Locks and Craig Mack to like 112 in total, like the list goes on and on. But you rarely hear the story of Chucky Thompson, which to me, he's as important to the early success as Bad Boy as anyone with his fingerprints on production. Like to me, they simply don't reach the heights that they got to without his fingerprints.
Listen, they needed that remix for Big Papa from Chucky Thompson. They needed that remix. That thing there was like, because Biggie before that was like, I'm robbing people, I'm the hoodlum in the corner,
so
like
true.
That guy.
It's so true.
That remix for Big Papa and One More Chance changed the game for Bad Boy because they were doing okay. They were doing okay before that, but that remix there, the girls came on board because it was you had the Timberlands and the dudes on the subway. They're like, yeah, okay, I messed with these guys, whatever. When the women came on board with the R&B rap stuff, that changed the game for them.
Yeah.
And it was his remix for those songs, both of them.
No, you're
that
right.
One More Chance
right,
in particular.
You're right because Big Papa wasn't. Yeah, there was an original version, like a demo version of Big Papa. That wasn't it. You're right.
Yeah. No, it was the remix with the Isley Brothers.
Yeah. Yeah, it changed everything because even when you think about like Juicy was dope. Everybody, like a lot of people love Juicy. I know some people that didn't like it, but universally Big Papa was like that was. And then when you combine it with the video too, like with the Hype Williams video, and it was so clean.
He had all of those celebrities that came down for the video, and it gave them it gave that whole it gave them the shout out and the promotion and be like, yeah, these guys are cool because like they had Heavy D on there. You had like Mary was there. There was a bunch of MC Light was in the video. Yeah, Busta Rhymes. There's a bunch of people in that video. But like that co-sign from that thing with that song, when it brought women on board for Biggie and what Bad Boy was doing, that was it. It was straight to the moon after that.
Yeah,
and you got to credit Chucky Thompson with that.
Yeah, no, you're right because that's the thing. Like Biggie had the streets. As we all know, like the mixtape, the streets, like the hip hop heads, it was him and Craig Mack. They were running. They had that period where they were bringing the East Coast back. But then you're right, that Big Papa song kind of changed everything. It changed before even One More Chance. But that one was like, that one hit you in the head. That one you can play in the clubs. That one, everybody, you knew there wasn't a genre, not even a genre, but there wasn't an area you weren't touching with that song.
Yeah,
and I mean, and I mean, he's the one that produced it.
Smooth.
Yeah,
it was smooth. And here's this dude who was talking about machine guns before, and I'm telling you, man, that cosign when women got on board, like it really set the tone for what they did, because they copied this blueprint from here on out for the rest of Bad Boy's run.
Yeah,
based on this one song.
No, you're right. So what were your thoughts when you saw the news that Chucky Thompson passed away? Like, what was the first thing that came to your mind?
I was sad, man, because I don't think people really appreciate like how involved this guy was in making this thing happen. Because he's a musician, he played instruments and stuff, he played piano and guitar and whatever. But like, these guys jumped on songs or whatever, and they set the tone for a lot of stuff. So, but he just didn't. People don't even think about Chucky Thompson.
They really don't.
But like, there's that Mary J. Blige album, that My Life. Like, this guy basically ran the album.
Oh, we're gonna get to that in a second, but
oh my god, man, that album, that album could bring me to tears sometimes, man. It's so good.
It was unbelievable production, but that's the thing to me. Like, the first thing that came to mind, like same like you, like. I got sad because obviously Bismarck, he passed away like a few weeks before, a month ago at this point now, but because of all the health situations he was going through for the past year, you know what I mean? Like, you weren't like, you were saddened, but you weren't shocked. You know? What I mean?
I knew about Biz before, so I was like, oh, he's in the hospital. Oh man, okay.
Yeah,
but this is just random. Honestly.
Yeah, and I know for me, like, I think I was scrolling through Twitter, and it wasn't even like a celebrity; it was just some random person, I guess, that's on my timeline on Twitter. And I saw them just post a picture with Chucky Thompson. They're like, man, you meant a lot to me, such and such and such. And I'm reading it, and I'm like, that guy looks familiar. And then when she was like, rest in peace, Chucky Thompson, I'm like, oh, you got to be kidding me.
Damn.
You got to be kidding me, you know? Because that's the thing. Like, the other thing I think about, too, is like, I was just talking about earlier about like Biggie and Puffy getting the accolades, and they're the biggest. Like, their names are on the marquee, you know what I mean, when it comes to Bad Boy. That's the thing. When you're handing out credit, there's always going to be some people who get missed, you know.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of Motown with all the guys who played the music for Motown.
Oh, the brothers. The Johnson brothers?
That's a funk.
The Funk Brothers. The Funk Brothers or something. Yeah.
These guys were so influential into Jackson 5s and all this stuff like that. I don't think they could have had the same success without those bass lines and the songs that they played the way they did. And it's the exact same thing here.
Absolutely.
Especially like 93, 94, that era. Like
the early part of Bad Boy, especially.
Yeah, it couldn't be. And, we got with the Uptown and Mary, because Mary was in Uptown.
Right.
And, man.
But to your point, what Usher, you're saying though too, it's like, oh my God, because that Usher song, the "Think of You," that is a classic. That is a classic early Usher record. Like, that when Usher came out, I remember at the time you were just like, this guy, whatever, like another, because we came off of like ABC and the not Boyz II Men, who was the Soul for Real and all these guys and stuff. So like you were seeing it, you're just like, okay, whatever. But "Think of You" was a record where you're like, oh. Okay, this one's different.
That's just real. Like,
this one's different. Real. This one's different. This one's different. Like, that one was different, but it was a vibe. Like, that song was a whole vibe. You know what I mean? That song was a whole vibe. But like, to touch your point, like, you think of Motown, you don't think of the Funk Brothers. You think of like Berry Gordy. You think of the Jackson 5. You think of Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross. You don't think of the people that laid that landscape out.
You can't. Those bass lines at the beginning of the song, like, you can't. You need that.
Yeah.
You needed that. The way that dude played the guitar, like, you needed that. That changed the song.
And it's funny because when it comes to the sharing of credit, there's going to be some people who get missed, and I always felt him and Easy Mo B were the two guys from Bad Boy where you were like, man, these guys. Like there was a party bus that was going, and these guys like missed the bus. You know what I mean? Like they did not get the credit because Easy Mo B, for example, like this guy produced what, like on Ready to Die, he produced like 6 songs.
Of all the biggest hits, this guy had his hands on it at the beginning of the spin.
And you never hear from him. You never hear from the guy. You never you know, like if you're a hip hop head or you're especially like dialed into the producer side of things, like yourself. Like you know who Easy Mo B is, you think of that, but like that guy had such success. Like he's the one that especially early Bad Boy, like it was him that had so much to do with it. Yeah,
with the Craig Mack, the Flavor in the Air, he did that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because like even with The Rock, like even with Rockefeller, like they had a lot of producers roll through there, but Just Blaze and Kanye definitely got their respect and got their love.
Yeah, Bink. Yeah, it was the 3 of them when they did the Blueprint album.
And Bink, right.
Yeah. The 3 of them did the bulk of the production for Rockefeller.
Right.
I'd like to when they were like, oh, everything they do touch goes platinum. That's the 3 of them were doing everything.
Yeah, you're right. But the thing is though, at least they got their credit. Like when you think of Just Blaze, you're like, Just Blaze is. I don't even think he gets enough credit himself, but you're like, that guy's a great producer. You know, we already know what it is with Kanye. You know what I mean? Bink probably gets forgotten, but you look at the
his
linear
discography
notes,
is nasty.
Yeah, his
I remember
is crazy.
I went to his house when he lived in New Jersey. And Bink had so many plaques on the wall that they were like he just had them on the ground, like they were like
he couldn't even
door
put them on the wall
stoppers
anymore. Yeah,
they're honestly the plaque that he had for Jay-Z, Beanie Siegel, all of them. He had this thing. It was basically leaned up against the wall because he couldn't fit it anywhere.
Wow.
And I'm like, I'm looking at it like this on the ground, like, dude, he's stepping over it, like, this thing's in the way, like God damn it, man. But like these kind of artists, like they were getting platinum plaques back when it was unheard of to get a platinum plaque for rap music.
Yep.
In the 90s, that was huge. That was a huge deal.
People
were barely
impossible.
going gold, and that's like the superstars were barely going gold.
Yeah.
So to be attached to songs that are doing 3 to 4 million as a single is crazy.
And on top of that, it's not like how it is, now where it's like, well, obviously now is like a streaming era, but like even with CDs and stuff where it's like they counted it when it was not bought but shipped. So you could ship gold, but it wasn't the same as actually buying gold.
Selling
gold,
so you can get over the hump a little bit. Like Mariah Carey did that a little bit too.
Right.
Because I think they were using Celine Dion's numbers or something. I can't remember that story.
But
there's an urban tale about that.
What's the urban tale? You may as well tell it.
There's an urban tale that for Mariah Carey's first album, they were using the barcode for her on other artists that were already super successful. They had a run of some of their albums, so they would get scanned, and Mariah Carey would get credit for it. That's the urban legend. But I heard it from executives, so I think there's probably some kind of truth to it in some way.
There's a little bit of fire.
It was somebody at a record label. I won't say who, but like somebody at a record label said it. So I was like, yeah, it's possible. I don't know.
That's crazy. But yeah, like I said, to me, like you think of some of the records that he produced, like it's honestly like going across my Twitter and seeing that. To me, it was almost a shame because I felt like his passing was almost a footnote.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I just felt like it was almost a footnote. You're just like, wow, so that's it? Like that's all?
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's even talking about this. I mean, now like as the day went on and the next day, like people were talking about it. But I felt like when I saw it, I was just like, that's all? Like, like all the work this guy did, and you're right, because it seemed like his persona was more like laying in the cut and just playing the background, and like he wasn't about like the whole flossy era and all that stuff. Even though he provided the soundscape to it too, but like you could see he wasn't. He was more of the laid back guy. It seemed like.
Yeah, he was just chill. Like you don't. I think that chill energy from him is probably why people don't remember him that much for being as involved as he was.
Right. Because even without the reality TV, you remember Stevie J more than you know what I mean, like more than you would actually remember
Even
Chucky Thompson.
Rashad Smith and Nasheem Merrick and these guys, like you kind of you know who they were.
D. Angeletti, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like you see the thing, like these names are just rolling off your tongue just because. Like, when was the last time you thought about these names? Though.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right.
And I think like, oh yeah, Puffy, yeah, okay. They're rolling off these names like it's crazy.
And the thing is, Hitmen were big too, like as a production team, but
yeah.
But I still don't think they resonated the same way, like that Chucky Thompson did on his own, like prior to even being with them. So,
but I think they got the overshadowing because of Puff. Like, Puff's had his hand in everything, so he gets the credit for everything.
So to you, like, what? This is. I know this is a hard question to ask. What is your favorite song from that era that he produced? And then also, I guess a separate question. What do you think is his most important work?
Ooh. From the era that he did, I would say
it's tough to say. There's no wrong answer here. There's no wrong answer. There is, but there's no wrong answer.
For me personally, I would say "You Bring Me Joy" from Mary's album.
That's your favorite?
Yeah, that's my favorite song from Chucky Thompson. All time.
Okay.
That Mary album, because he basically produced the whole album. Okay. You can throw a song in the air and pick one at random, and it's fine.
No, you're right. You're right. And what do you think is his? Well, actually, I'll come back to this.
I would say like his biggest song is still "One More Chance," though.
So, do you think that's his most important record?
Yeah, by far, that's his most important record.
I didn't even think about that. Damn it, Keo.
One More Chance remix is the thing that puts that. I'm telling you, Bad Boy was the underground rappers with Timberland and stuff until One More Chance came out.
Yeah, I forgot about One More Chance. You're right. You're right about that. Damn it,
what were you gonna say?
Well, my favorite one, it's not even, I'll be honest, not even hip hop, really and truly. I think I was more thinking on the R&B side. My favorite one that he produced during that era was Faith Evans. You Used to Love Me.
Oh, yeah.
Like, dude, like that song, like Keo, I could sit back and I can't tell you the first time I heard it, but when I hear that song, it takes me right back to my basement in my house in Montreal, back in like the grade 11. Like I remember that after graduation, just sitting there, just blasting this album, like, and blasting this song, like, yo, this song sounded unlike anything I heard at that time, and it was just not only the fact that it was a beautiful record. It's probably one of the most timeless R&B tracks from that era because it never stopped being great.
Yeah, that record, you're right.
Yeah, that record never stopped being great. And then the secret too is I don't think that record was sampled. I think that was like an original. Like I think that was an original record. I hope I'm not wrong on that, but I think that was an original record. Like there was
I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't think there was any like samples to it and stuff. It came from this, Curtis Mayfield. I don't think that was one of those records. I think that was just like that was just straight. So every time I hear that record, I'm just like, yo, this record. Even a couple hours before I even called you, like I played it a little bit. And I'm like, man, this record still hits, man. This record.
Yeah, no, it hit me when the first time you heard it, like, what is this? Because Faith's got her voice is just it's not traditional.
No
R&B.
Right.
And that beat, when that beat came in with the drums, I'm like, oh damn, okay.
The beat is incredible. Like that, the production was he did like a that was to me that was one of his that's one of his best works, man. And I know I can't even say I'm putting a lot on it because that like anybody who was during that remembers when that song came out, it was a monster immediately. Like you didn't know all you knew about Faith was that she was dating Biggie or she was Biggie's wife. That's all you heard. Biggie's girl. But when that song came out, you were like, "Oh my God, what the hell is this?" Yeah,
it's like it fits right in. Like it fits right in like a glove. You're like, okay, all right.
Yeah.
Because usually when they got like some girlfriend, whatever, you're like, oh, is she gonna sing too? Oh boy. But it's like, no, man. It fit perfectly. The vibe and everything was there. It's smooth.
And you're so right about that. Usually it's never what you expect, or it's what you expect. You don't think it's gonna be that great, but that is a great first record to come out with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's a great first record. I would say the other the other question where I was asking what's the most important, your answer is a great answer because One More Chance was great. I was gonna say the whole My Life album. That was my answer. It's the whole My Life album.
I agree with that too. That album was influential in a lot of stuff.
Oh,
it was a big deal.
Absolutely. I mean, it's my favorite album of Mary's. I mean, I did a podcast on it for the 25th anniversary. There's a documentary on it on Amazon. Like,
yeah.
And that's the thing too, right? It's just it kind of speaks to what we were saying before. It's an iconic album, but Diddy gets most of the credit. And I'm not taking anything away from him because obviously I wasn't in the studio. I know, you know, he had an influence on it because obviously he did all his work with Mary from, you know, the Real Love and all that stuff, you know, the
411,
the 411 like the album and the remix album and stuff. So I'm not taking any credit away from Diddy, but for My Life, he gets most of the credit. And you know, Chucky Thompson did a gang of work on that. Like you know for a fact that this guy had his hands all over that album.
Yeah. Well, I think the best part about that album was that it wasn't like a committee. It was more focused because Chucky did most of the work.
Yeah.
And so it had a unique feel that all these other albums didn't have.
Yeah. And it's funny because, you know, it's a hard question to ask, like, what's your favorite between, like, what's the 401 and that album, right? But I always
My Life, man.
Yeah, I always chose My Life because honestly,
this was My Life.
Yeah, I always chose My Life because My Life felt like, I mean, and don't get me wrong, Mary was young at the time, but it felt like she hit another level. Like it felt like, oh, like she's like matured. Like this is, like, you know, like she's on her way. Like that's how it felt like. It didn't feel like, oh man, this is dope. Well, this is gonna last a little while. Like 411 is a legend. It's a classic too. But
it's the thing is though, like I like the 411 album, but it was the remix album that I was like, oh, okay, Mary's here.
Yeah,
the 411 was just okay. But it was the remix album that Bad Boy did that was like, oh, okay, this is for real. But still, to me, My Life is such a well-rounded album with all of the music. Like it's a classic, man. And it's a classic that holds up. Like I get emotional listening to it still to this day because, you know, like oh man, what's that song? The one with the Isaac Hayes sample.
Isaac Hayes. Oh my gosh.
I love you. That song.
Yes. Oh,
that beat comes in like, oh.
Yeah.
You start getting in your feels, man. Looking at the window with the rain coming down, like. Oh. But overall, I'm just saying, like, as far as an R&B album goes, that is the most well-rounded R&B album coming out in the 90s, bar none.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna get an argument out of me with that, but I think
Be Happy, like, come on, man.
It's my favorite Mary. It's my favorite Mary record.
Yeah, I can listen to Be Happy on loop for just an hour and not even, you know, lose track of time. Like it's such a nice melody.
The thing is what you have to respect. The thing is what you have to respect though is, I mean, you know this obviously, like I said, being a producer, it is hard. It is hard to even make an album. Just to make whether it's good, whether it's bad, whether it's like it's a classic, whether it's trash, it is not easy to make an album. To create an album from the writing, from the production, you know, rehearsing, you know, going over, like, you know, doing how many takes over and over and over. Like it is not easy, and it's costly. If you know what I mean, and it's costly because back in those days, especially, like you're renting out these big studios.
Yeah, it used to cost like $300,000-$400,000 to make an album.
To make an album,
like that.
Yeah, it's crazy. Then you bring in musicians. You might bring in, you know, like a guitarist to come in and replay some loops. It's like it is like just to do an album, it's tough. But to do a classic album, like an album that like 25, 30 years later, you know what I mean? It's still like people are still bumping it, you know, like to the point where, like, again, like Mary did a documentary on it. You know what I mean? Like the fact that she could even do that and people are still watching it. If she did her tour right before the pandemic, everybody went to it. It was sold out. Right? Like the fact that, like, you know, like when you can make something to that degree that like 30 years later, you're still touring off of it. I mean, like I said,
volume.
Yeah, it speaks major volumes. But on top of that, it's like, I don't know. I don't think people understand just how hard that is to do. And then when people are like, "Oh, do it again," you're like, "Are you crazy? You know how hard it was? You know how hard it was for me to do that?"
Yeah. No, I look at Black Sheep like that. Putting that first album together was incredible, and the second one's like, ooh.
Yeah, you're like, dude,
yeah, it's hard.
Again. You're like, what? You're like, what? Like, it's a reason why like the Patti LaBelle's and the Marvin Gaye's and stuff are legends, because they put out 2 or 3, or Stevie Wonder put out 2 or 3 classic albums, or 4, like multiple classic albums. That is incredibly hard to do. To be in that zone and that kind of space, that is incredibly hard to do. I think, like, that's my personal opinion. I think his most important work was My Life, just because that album just stood the test of time. And then, like I said again, there's nothing wrong with your answer, because One More Chance still stands the test of time too. You know what I mean? Like people still put that, like, the fact that they're on the radios to this day. Like, I was reading something today where they're saying, like, it still gets hundreds of thousands of plays every month still on the radio, like on all general radio. It still gets that all these years later.
That's crazy.
The news of his death passed along the timelines. I'm like, nah, man, like this is kind of why I want to do the pod, to like give those little bit of roses, just to say, like, yo, like this like, people don't realize this was a legend that passed by. Like a lot of us were listening to his music, like, or his production, his craft heavily. You know what I mean? Like we were all listening to that, and all, like, that was like the soundtrack. A lot of his stuff that he did was a soundtrack for a lot of people. You know, for women, for hip hoppers, for the R&B crowd, for men, women, everybody, like everybody in between. Like, everybody was influenced by the stuff that he did. But it's just amazing that he doesn't get the like, when you talk about great producers and you talk about, influencers, he does not get the credit.
He does not get the credit. You're right. You're absolutely right. Like, you think about how the songs they had that were big hits, like, they're on par with everybody else's big hits.
Yeah.
You really think about it. Like his big hits. Because I was looking at his, before, we started up this thing, I was looking at the discography here. And, this guy worked with everybody. Worked with Ice Cube. He worked with Shantae Savage, man. Like,
I know.
Like Brian McKnight, Mariah Carey, Total, Maya, Nas. He did the one mic for Nas.
He did the one mic for Nas. I didn't even know that until I was reading some of the articles. I'm like, shit, he did one mic. I'm like, yo, and that record was a monster, right?
Yeah, that was a big record for
that record was
Stillmatic.
Huge. Yeah, that record was huge. Yeah, and like I said, Tevin Campbell, like he did New Edition when New Edition came back. Like, I think he had their biggest hits.
The other thing too is that this is the stuff that he got credit for, and I know from being in the studio, a lot of times you're like, oh, just fix the drums and do that, and you don't get any credit for that. Yeah. You're just there, you're hanging out, and you're like, oh yeah, you should change the bass line here. Most important part of the song you fix, but you don't get any credit for it.
I get no credit for it, because I think, it's funny. My brother was telling me that like he was doing stuff from Uptown too.
Yeah,
he's
been around for a minute.
He wasn't getting the credit.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of the guys from Bad Boy, the Hitmen and all thing, I don't think they fully got credit for a lot of stuff they did. Because like even Kanye was ghost producing for them.
Yeah,
he was doing stuff for D-Dot, and
you're right.
And you didn't get no shine from it.
Right.
Until he got to Jay-Z, he didn't get any shine for anything he did. Like, that happens though. That happens.
Yeah, and I think that's just part of the
part of the growing pains of you gotta be in the studio.
You ghost produce. Like, I always say that the legendary story of the Neptunes doing they did Rex and Effect.
Mm-hmm. I didn't know that.
All I want to do is on the zoom, 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 and the boom. Yeah, they produced it, but it was ghost produced.
Because the funny part about that was Bink and the Neptunes were all hanging around Teddy Riley back in the day, because Virginia, and same with Timberland.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And
that's
Misty.
right. Yeah, that's
all those people were all hanging around trying to get this shine, and it ended up these guys all looped him and surpassed him like 30 times on the charts.
Yeah. But at least he got his credit as somebody that was a major influence on the Virginia scene.
Well,
right?
I mean, like he set the tone for Virginia or whatever.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was talking to Matt Skills. He was telling me all this stuff about all these Virginia people, and everybody was working with Teddy because Teddy was the man.
Yeah.
And you just don't get any credit for it. But I'm sure that if Teddy wants to open up about what they did and what they didn't do, that would be a very interesting conversation.
Oh, 100%. 100%. I mean, you look at like Chucky Thompson when you see the story of his life. You know, he's coming from the go-go, like the go-go culture in D.C., right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, I know a lot of people don't know about the go-go culture. And that scene is major to the point where, what was the protest that was happening a couple years ago? I'm not sure what the movement was during that time, but it was like a couple of years ago. It was regarding the go-go stuff in D.C. And I remember there was a lot of protests and stuff. There was something that there was being legislated or something. I can't remember what it was, but it was almost like Save Go-Go. And I remember like Chocolate City represented to like it was ridiculous the way they represented and showed out for. You know, for all of that stuff, right? And he was like, I wouldn't say he was at the forefront. He wasn't at the forefront of that, but like, you know, the fact that that's where he got to start. You know, he got to start from that, and just you know to go from there. Was it Chucky Brown? I think he was like the percussionist for Chucky Brown.
Okay.
So he comes from that, goes to Uptown, then he follows Diddy over the Bad Boy, and then creates all those legendary hits, put out songs for years. You know what I mean? And you know, like only now, like he passes away. Now people are like, "Oh shoot, I didn't know he did all that." And you're just like, "Wow!" Like it's just a shame. Sometimes they say, man, it's like as much as people rip Kanye West for being overly cocky and sticking his chest out.
You had to though.
But the one thing you can say is that you're gonna remember him.
Yeah.
You'll never say he didn't get the credit.
Yeah, well,
right?
that's the point though, because I think for somebody like him, you're sitting at the back of the bus doing all this work and not getting any credit for it, and you just gotta be bubbling inside of like, yo, this is not right. And when I get on, I'm gonna make sure everybody knows what I did, and he did. Like that kind of thing makes sense because I don't know how long he was hanging around these guys, but it was a while. It was a couple years.
Yeah.
So. That a lot of stuff like the late 90s, early 2000s, a lot of hits these guys were doing. I mean, he's had his hands on it. I've seen it firsthand for producers to fix stuff, and then the other people just walk it out like it's theirs. I've seen it firsthand. Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Especially if
you're new,
you're like the young guy, and you don't have any credits under your belt.
Yep. Prepare to get your stuff taken away. Yep.
Yeah, you gotta take your L's, man. You just want people are just happy just to be in the studio.
Yeah.
And so like you just take your L's, and then eventually you get on, and some people you get to sell your music too. But
no, you're right, and that's the thing. It's like like this wasn't his nature. You know what I mean? It didn't seem like this was this guy like Chucky's nature to do that, but but
too late back.
Yeah,
you should have pushed for more music, man.
Yeah. The analogy I want to use is like. Sometimes, when people pass, depending on who they are, it's like a library is burnt down. You know what I mean? You just basically lost like a library of knowledge, a library of like a building worth of content of history. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's kind of like what I felt like with watching when I saw the news of him. It's like a whole building just went down in rubble. That you're just not gonna get back. You know what I mean?
I appreciate that Easy Mo B, at least on Instagram, he's digging in his thing. And same thing with Just Blaze. They're digging in and pulling up old songs and showing how they made them. And they used to do tours. I know Just Blaze used to do tours he came up here a bunch of times.
Yeah.
And he used to do shows and, talking about his music and stuff he did and how he made it, whatever. Like, I appreciate that kind of thing.
Oh, no, of course, because you want to. I always say you want to see how the sausage gets made, right?
Yeah.
You want to know how the stuff gets made behind the scenes because like there's an inner workings to that. That's the beauty in it, right? The beauty in it is not the destination, it's the journey. So to get to those points where it's like, okay, how did you come up with this idea? How did you come up with this this drum line or this snare or this hook, or you know what I mean, or what came across this melody. Like I live for those kind of stories, like in just all facets of life. I'm a sucker for that kind of stuff, right? So
because the thing is though, I know for us, like it's way into the weeds and a lot of people don't even care. But like for me, I live for this stuff.
Yeah.
I grew up flipping over the albums and listening to the music while I'm reading the liner notes.
Yeah, that was me too. And
I wanted to know who produced what, where the sample came from. I wanted to know all of that. What studio they went to, who engineered it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's like I said, it's cool to see those guys do those things. I see, DJ Premier, he's another one that's doing that too.
Yeah, he's doing that now too. Yeah.
But I'm like, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. But like in all facets of life, I love to see like how things are getting made behind the scenes. So
Premier started doing it when Guru died.
Yeah.
He started talking more about the stuff they were working on and going back to the samples and everything. I'm like, yeah, man, we need more of that. This current, and I don't want to be the old guy like this current journey music. These guys don't know what they're doing.
Yeah.
There's no soul. There's no nothing. And I don't know if I talked about it here before, but like, did you see that T-Pain rant?
Yes.
That was yeah.
Do something else.
Yeah.
Do something else.
I feel the same way because these guys are just copying a copy of a copy.
Yeah.
And so it's degraded so far now to nothingness.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that there's not good music out there, but
right, of course.
Stuff that people see that's pushed in front of you is the copy of a copy of a copy. And that's why it feels good, talking about these people here who made quality music, who's influential, that still to this day stands the test of time. Because the thing that T-Pain was talking about, these guys, you don't hear their music longer than a month if you're lucky.
It's true.
I don't.
And it's been, but the thing is, it's not even new. Like it's been that way for.
Yeah, it's been like that for a minute.
It's been that way for a long time. I would say even when T-Pain was out, like when T-Pain was like in his prime, like it was already that, because the whole ringtone era, all that stuff, like with both hip hop and R&B.
The ringtone thing made the songs disposable.
Yeah,
and it didn't matter anymore, and that's when it went off the cliff at that moment where. I'm not calling Soulja Boy out for it. I'm just saying that time period.
Yeah. No, for sure. It's a fact because there's a lot of hits that was going on during those times, or quote unquote hits that like you don't even remember the name of the people who sang it, much less the song itself. You know what I mean? As you said, it's become very disposable. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that too. The way technology is with music makes a lot of these things disposable too, especially streaming. But like somebody like Chucky Thompson definitely tapped into the soul of it. Like he was I would say a good example of what you could do when you're mixing your era with like with the yesteryear and stuff, and
in the 80s and whatever. But like think about it like this though. Do you get emotional when you listen to new music? Do you feel anything like just happy, sadness, anything? When you hear all the new songs
from new artists, and I mean, mind you, and I'll say this as not to sound like the guy that's screaming to get off my lawn while I cut my own grass, but it's one of those things where it's like I understand at this stage the music is not made for me anymore.
No, I know, it's not for me.
Yeah, the hit music that's out is not made for me. So like when a Nas and certain people come out, like that's more for me. Like I'm gonna go look out for that. You know what I mean? I'm gonna go look out for like certain artists when they come out with albums. Like.
Well, I'm just saying, like, do you feel anything when you hear this new music?
It's tough to say. Honestly, I would say R&B wise, it still gets me here and there. Some R&B, not all, but some.
Well, I'm just saying, like even like back in the day,
like an Anderson .Paak for me would be like a guy where I'm like, I'm turning it up, when I'm driving in my car, I'm blasting on the way to the club, like pre-COVID, and just what I mean, like I'm like it'll get a certain rise out of me, you know what I mean, in terms of like emotion, energy, that kind of thing, right? But
but
But it's
you know,
few and
you
far
gotta
in between.
you need the emotional part. That's the thing that makes these songs last for we're going on what 20 years now, 30 years for some of this stuff.
Hmm.
That emotional part when you hear these songs, that's the thing that makes these things last. And removing that, where it's just some noise and you got auto tune and just whatever, it's removing the emotional part of these songs. And I think that's the missing glue. Because like even because the thing is though, it's not that it's electronic or whatever. Because you had this in the '80s.
Yeah.
There's songs from the '80s that come on. It's all synthesizer, and you know it's not the greatest singer of all time, but you feel something when it comes on.
No, it's true. You're right.
There's something to that. I don't know. Like I don't have like the whole thesis all lined up or whatever, but you know what I'm saying? Like I feel like there's something too about how we were talking before. I remember exactly where I was when I hear Mary J. Blige's "My Life," the album. I remember the first time I heard it. I remember where I bought the tape from.
Mm-hmm.
I remember where I bought the vinyl for it. I remember all that stuff just instantly when I hear these songs. And I think too, the other factor is that there's no effort to listening music anymore.
Well,
So
I think that's a big part of it too. And it's
yeah,
funny because when I think about the verses with the Bow Wow and Soulja Boy. I didn't watch it, but
yeah,
I went by my sister's house during this time. My nephews and them were watching it, and they were like going crazy because they're like, "Oh, that was like all these stuff was in high school." And I'm like, I looked at it and I'm like, you know what? That would make sense because you guys would connect with it a little bit better because obviously it's your generation and stuff, right? But
yeah.
you're not also like you're not also. I don't know if you're looking at it with the same type of. And maybe you are. So maybe I can't even say that they're not. So maybe they are. But I understand what you're saying though in terms of that because I think each generation has memories and moments of songs and albums and different things that they that they can connect to their lives and they hold on to, right? But but you're right. But it's like I think the difference between the stuff that's going on now as opposed to like our generation or even like earlier was just even earlier, like even my parents' stuff, I can still spend a day just listening to 70s R&B. You know what I mean? Like because there's something about it that's still that timeless factor, that craftsmanship still hits you in the chest.
It's got heart,
It
man.
hits you in the chest. Like for like prime
Yes, it
example,
is.
going back to the other verses when the Isley Brothers and Earth, Wind and Fire had their verses.
Yeah.
I knew, and I'm telling you this, I knew grown men who were like damn near in tears watching that verses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because you're like it brought you back through so many different emotions, and I get it because those songs like it still hits you. It still hits you in your chest. It still hits you in your soul.
Yeah.
It still hits you.
I think I think it's how we experience the music more than
that
anything
too.
else.
Yeah.
There's some kind of effort into it. You know, you used to watch the Soul Train or BT or whatever, but like it's how we consume this content rather than on YouTube where you just press a button and it's there.
Yeah.
I think there's something about it.
Well, I think part of it too is, and I guess this is kind of relates to circle this back to like the Chucky Thompson thing before we wrap this up is just like, I think the way you to touch on your point, the way we consume it, we have to work harder for it. You know what I'm saying? Because I think of like the times of like, okay, you know, say like My Life Was Coming, you knew like, okay, My Life was coming out, you know, Labor Day. It's like, ooh, you can't wait. You just saw the video. Ooh, you can't wait for it.
Yeah,
you know
yeah,
what I mean?
yeah.
Like, I can't like unless you got the bootleg copy. You know, you couldn't wait for like Labor Day to come so that you can get this album. You're gonna consume it. You're gonna watch it. You may have friends who may buy the albums with you. You may have some other friends who couldn't afford it. That's gonna dub it on a cassette and listen to their Walkman on the way home. You know what I mean? So it's like there was an anticipation. There was a build up for it. I think in this generation where it kind of, I think those unauthorized album drops where it just you just wake up and the album's in your account the next day. You know, like that also brings its own set of buzz, which I kind of like. You know what I mean? So it's like when you wake up in the morning and you're like, wait a minute, D'Angelo has an album out? What? Oh man! What? And it's like, that part of it is cool too. But again, because of streaming.
There's no effort.
Yeah,
it's
because of streaming. Yeah, there's no work for it. It's just like I'll get to it when I get to it.
Yeah. Like there's so many albums I still haven't listened to. It's just there. Like I'll get to it. Like I feel bad about it. Like, but there's a lot of albums out there. Like, and thing too, I think that there's maybe 2 artists right now that still get you the the pomp and circumstance of, oh, there's new music coming.
Yeah.
One of them's Drake, the other one's Kanye.
Yeah. There's still
right now,
a build up.
There's a build still have that build. Like Drake has this build up for his album that's supposed to be coming out soon. Kanye sold a stadium out to listen to, just to him to play music off of his phone. He sold a stadium out.
Just samples.
Just to hear some samples of some music he's gonna play. You know what I'm saying? Like that's a different planet compared to a lot of these new artists that's out here right now. They can't do that.
But as you said, like it's and just to circle back to this point, like it's just those type of things. Like, and I think that type of artistry and that type of craftsmanship, like circling back to Chucky Thompson, it's what makes you appreciate their work years later. You know what I mean? Like you still connect with it all these years later, and not just yourself. Like all generations, I think connect with it, like because it was just so well done. It was just so well done that you can't not appreciate it. And damn it, I wanted to do this for like 20, 30 minutes. I hate you, Keo, because you always do this every time we do these pods. I knew it.
I'm sorry, man.
I knew it. It's not your fault. It's my fault. It's my fault. I saw the timeline. I blew past through it. I looked at it. I just said, damn it. I got so much more to say.
Oh man, we could go on for another 2 hours. Real talk. You could easily go on for another 2 hours.
It's all good. But let's wrap this up here. But thank you for hopping on the Ave, which is a semi-quick pod. But thank you for coming on the Ave.
It's all good, man. I appreciate it. Anytime you're talking music, man, I love doing these shows, man.
No, for sure. And like I said, man, I figured from this perspective, especially because you produce, you bought music, you made music. Talking about Chucky Thompson was the way to go here, man. I just figure like you got to shine a little light on this, man.
Absolutely. Can't wait till these people die before we care about them.
No, absolutely. Thank you once again for checking out the Ave Podcast. A special shout out goes out to DJ Keo for coming on the Ave and having a discussion on the life and career of Chucky Thompson, the underrated legend. Rest in peace to that brother. He didn't get enough roses that he deserved. At the very least, let's hope he gets them now. I'll be back with a new episode of the Ave Podcast next week. And in a few weeks, I'll have the new episode of my story out on University of Cal basketball player Jalen Celestin as he enters his sophomore season. I'll let you know the details soon, but I'll be out in a few weeks. Also, hit the like button, the favorite button. Thank you for tuning in. Also, rate and review and subscribe to your favorite platforms under the South Shore Ave name. And check out the rest of my catalog. Make sure you go to SouthShoreAve.com. Once again, that's SouthShoreAve.com. One more time for emphasis. That's SouthShoreAve.com. For DJ Keo, this is Cal C. And you just tuned in to the Ave Podcast on South Shore Ave Radio. Until next time, folks, peace. We out.